People really don't understand what capitalism is. They think it's this giant machine where powerful corporations and the government work together to oppress those with little to no money. But that's a fundamental misunderstanding. Capitalism isn't separate from humanity. It is humanity. Capitalism naturally arises from civilization. It's the process by which labor is divided into specialization. It's the evolution of man from savagery to sophistication. It's nothing more than one man trading his resources with another. And yet online, socialists continue to equate it with a system created by the wealthy class to hold down the poor. But they're wrong. They use all these messy definitions like welfare capitalism, state capitalism, corporate capitalism, and crony capitalism to get their point across. What they're in fact doing is strawmanning the true meaning of capitalism, a meaning that has slowly eroded away from its original intent. There's only one capitalism, the respect of private property. Any other system that disrespects private property is not capitalism. The United States today is barely capitalist. It's been corrupted by the political and culture war to change it into something that is deeply sick. I want to make this very clear. Anything other than capitalism is essentially just a justification to steal. One will ask socialists the question, is it okay to harm someone? They will never answer yes or no, because if they answer no, they will have no choice but to agree with the capitalist. And if they answer yes, then they must follow the logical absurdity of unjustified violence to its end. So instead, the socialist will always answer neither yes nor no, but that there are instances when aggressive violence is okay, like when we're taxing people in order to care for the needy. However, answering anything else to yes or no is an arbitrary answer. There is no objective justification for it. Rather, it's a subjective preference. So when someone answers the question of whether we can steal from another with, well, we can do it sometimes, they are in fact just saying, well, it would make me feel better if we stole from some people to give to others. This isn't an argument, it's just your feelings. And we all have feelings. But feelings aren't what makes something right. If we create a legal system around subjective or arbitrary law, there will be chaos. Legal outcomes become unpredictable. Public confidence will be undermined. Contradictory laws will appear. This is why law cannot be arbitrary, because doing so will destroy the idea of fair conflict resolution. What socialists instead want is an unfair legal system that prioritizes a victim class over a working class. But this will only lead to conflict. I know this is kind of a long intro, but I want you to understand what's really being claimed here. Socialists just want to steal people's money, and they have no justified reason for doing so. And that brings me to why I decided to create this video. I saw this video pop up in my feed, so I wanted to talk about it. And I want to show why attacking capitalism is kind of pathetic.
Capitalism is inevitable. It is the natural order of things, a part of human nature. It is the objective, neutral, non-ideological reflection of how the world works. Or at least, that's what its supposedly pragmatic and unbiased proponents would like you to think. And most people already do. Capitalism is the worst economic system except for all the others. Capitalism isn't perfect, but it's definitely the best economic system ever invented. There is no alternative. We have reached the end of history. That's just how the world works. Every single day, I read dozens of comments along the lines of, I mostly agree with you, your analysis was spot on, until you started blaming capitalism. Communism has already been tried, and it failed. Capitalism is imperfect, but it's the best we have. People seem to mostly agree with the critique of capitalism. They see its flaws and shortcomings. But for many, considering any kind of radical change, any kind of novel alternative, entices fear more than anything else. Despite being flawed and outright cruel in the eyes of many, capitalism is still treated as a comfort zone, as an imperfect protection from the horrors that might await us if we try to change it.
The flaws of capitalism aren't even the flaws of capitalism. They're flaws of the world. It's not capitalism's fault that there are limited resources in this world. It's not capitalism's fault that hierarchies form. It's not capitalism's fault that there are poor and sick people. It's not capitalism's fault that crime exists. The reason why so many people hate capitalism is that it creates a system that shows the tangible evidence of a hierarchy. And socialists hate hierarchies. Socialists hate hierarchies because it shows that they must compete with others. It shows that they don't deserve a participation trophy. It's a hard truth of the world that people must compete, and that certain people are just better than others. There are more attractive looking people. There are more athletic people. There are people who are incredibly genetically healthy. There are people who are born with a higher IQ. There are people who are witty, popular, and charismatic. And there are those who are financially intelligent. These are all hierarchies that are painfully true. And yes, it does suck that some people are better than others, but this is just the truth of the world. You can try to get rid of hierarchies, but you will never succeed. You will only face the consequences of messing with the natural order of the universe. So what you actually think are capitalism's flaws are just something else entirely.
Valiantly and wholeheartedly defending the hegemony of the established world order against the dark specter of communism, of the potentiality of something new, is somehow seen as courageous and virtuous, while opposing it is seen as treacherous, dangerous, and dystopian. Thus, the reverse psychology of capitalist realism is more sinister than any dystopia Orwell or Huxley ever could have imagined. War is peace, freedom is slavery, and as Zizek is often cited saying, ideology today is unfreedom, which you sincerely personally experience as freedom. Nonetheless, the ways in which capitalism establishes its status as the omnipresent, objective truth primarily include tampering with our perception of history. As Mark Fisher puts it, the power of capitalist realism derives in part from the way that capitalism subsumes and consumes all of previous history. Deleuze and Guattari described capitalism as a kind of dark potentiality which haunted all previous social systems. Capital, they argue, is the untamable thing, the abomination which primitive and feudal societies warded off in advance.
This is so ridiculous. Tell me what's so evil about a potato farmer trading some of his potatoes with an apple farmer. Tell me what's so evil about a seamstress trading a dress for some stalks of corn. Tell me what's so evil about a writer publishing a book for people to read if they pay him with some of their food. The truth is that none of those things are evil, and yet that's exactly capitalism in its rawest form. Capitalism is nothing more than unrestricted trade between two or more consenting adults. It's nothing more than voluntarism. Capitalism is the only economic system that advocates against violence. All others want to violently steal from others. And that's just the truth. Voluntarism and capitalism are the same thing. They're free interaction between two people. And the moment things get violent, it's no longer voluntary. And then it's no longer capitalism.
In its conquest of appropriating all of human history, the most popular argument is that humans have supposedly always been greedy, competitive, and profit-seeking, just like our beloved capitalist. This very argument, besides being palpably wrong in every way possible, as already explained in a video of my own, but also by Hakim and Second Thought on their channels, is a perfect example of capitalist realism and its business ontology. We are being convinced by all its agents and pundits alike that engaging in ruthless competition at the expense of others, kicking the ladder and greedily enjoying the spoils is simply a natural state of being, reflected throughout our own history, but also in the animal kingdom.
Let's talk about profit for a minute. To put it simply, when capitalist profit occurs, it means that each party, both the consumer and producer, benefit. This comes from praxeology's core axiom of human action. Man acts purposefully. An example of this would be if I wanted to buy a taco from a taco vendor for $2. If I hand the vendor $2, it means I necessarily value the taco more than the money. And the same can be said about the vendor, who prefers my $2 over the taco. The reason we value the other item comes from the rule of marginal utility. The taco vendor excels in creating tacos, and so he has an excess of tacos. However, I excel in something else, like my job, which pays me money. But the taco vendor doesn't need all the tacos he produced, and found out that other people who don't have tacos want tacos. They want it more than the money they have. In this voluntary transaction, both parties benefit more because they are both gaining something more valuable than what they had before. And this is why profit is good. Because voluntary profit necessarily means that people are gaining value from the product that they are buying and consuming.
Alright, so why is it then that we always hear the same arguments and surface level catchphrases being fired as rhetorical ammunition ad nauseum? Why do we still have people who get neurotic and emotional in their sacred duty to defend capitalism, even when they're being exploited themselves? Why are you yourself, dear viewer, still perhaps skeptical of any alternatives and prefer to cling on to the status quo just in case? Let's take a look at a few possible reasons. Well, the first category of people would be those who base their worldview on a deep misunderstanding of what capitalism is. How many times have you heard or said how it's not capitalism, it's globalism, corporatism, the Jews, corruption, bad mentality and mindset, crony, predatory capitalism, etc.? How many times have you heard someone defend capitalism on the premise that this current abomination is in fact not the true, pure reflection of capitalist philosophy, completely ignoring the historical context?
Again, the problem is that you don't know what capitalism is. Capitalism is simply voluntary trade, with private property. Anything else is just not capitalism. This is why it's superior than any other economic system. All other economic systems are inherently violent. They're inherently criminal. Capitalism just means that I'm not allowed to steal, hurt, or aggress on you in any way. What you hate so much is actually just the state, which does hurt and steal and coerce people against their will. You need to understand that capitalism is not a part of the state. They are antithetical.
Then we have the personal responsibility gang, those who live out their arrogance and survivor bias to the fullest. This type of apologist will predictably accuse progressives of rejecting personal accountability and responsibility, for blaming others and blaming some abstract thing called capitalism for their own problems and suffering. You know, the whole Jordan Peterson clean up your room first, life is suffering kind of bullshit.
As for personal responsibility, again, it seems like you don't understand how life works. Life is pain. That's a true feature of life. You don't have any inherent rights. Nobody owes you anything. You're not owed happiness or pleasure or a family or a happy relationship. Those are all privileges. And I know this is a painful thing to hear, but it's just the truth. People don't owe their private property to others. You have no justification for why they should. I agree with you that life can severely suck, and sometimes might not even be worth living. But this isn't the fault of any other person in the world, and it's certainly not the collective responsibility of humanity. It's incredibly immature to expect things to be given to you for just existing. You must be responsible for yourself if you want to have a good life. That's just a harsh truth you need to accept. You can always revert back to violence if you want, but this will only be met with violence, ensuring mutual destruction.
Nonetheless, the next broad category is, in a way, an extension of the personal responsibility gang, who equally fetishize personal success stories as examples of how the system can be used to your advantage. You know, the good old from rags to riches American dream sort of thing. A fairy tale that has been exposed as utterly ridiculous, in the light of increasingly monopolistic, predatory, and ruthless behavior of the lucky pioneers of competitive capitalism who have now become the sentinels of monopoly capitalism. These petty individuals take the possibility of one day becoming a millionaire and member of the haute bourgeoisie with their brilliant entrepreneurship and financial gymnastics around the system itself and sell it as a noble lifestyle that everyone can follow, ignoring the fact that only a select few can end up in the elite club. They see their chances of social mobility as almost guaranteed due to their street smarts of generating passive income, investing in crypto and stocks, waking up at 3 in the morning to do dropshipping and work on 3 other side hustles. And they do their best to convince you that it's your fault if you let them rule over you, instead of becoming one of the rulers yourself. Many of the petite bourgeois, that is, small business owners, managerial professionals, miniature stockholders, and financial gamblers, in actuality share more material interest with the working class that they despise so incredibly much than with the big bourgeoisie that they aspire to join. The bourgeoisie proper directs enormous efforts into anti-competitive, monopolistic, and predatory machinations to maintain their position at the top of the pyramid. The ruling class is a very, very premium club, and the pathetic wet dreams of the metropolitan petite bourgeois will not change their self-interested practices of utterly anti-meritocratic, nepotist, and dynastical rule.
And this is why I'm against the political system. Because politics is the only way wealthy elites can actually oppress people. In the system of politics, with monopolized violence, the most elite always turn out on top because they have control over the whole system. They control the lobbyists, the media and news organizations, and the political candidates. Politics isn't a tool for the people. It's a game invented by the elites to control everyone else. Without politics, wealthy elites cannot control the monopolized, centralized government. They can only engage in more free trade. And if they attempt to violently take over society, they'll be met with an overwhelming backlash, and then they'll be toppled.
Alright, you say. I might be tempted to give this post-capitalist alternative the benefit of the doubt. But what about all of those failed attempts at establishing communism during the Cold War? Hasn't that shown us the inability of good intentions to transcend human nature? Hasn't it proven us that seeking change is futile and that radicalist adventurism can only result in tragedy and totalitarian tyranny similar to that of Nazism? Regarding the burden of the past on the backs of new generations in their revolutionary prospects, Karl Marx had the following to say: "Men make their own history, but they do not make it as they please. They do not make it under self-selected circumstances, but under circumstances existing already, given and transmitted from the past. The tradition of all dead generations weighs like a nightmare on the brains of the living."
Socialism and communism only works through violence. When they eventually arrive at your doorstep in their new utopia, the socialist and communist will demand your money for their great economy. And when you refuse, they will violently take it. If socialism and communism were truly peaceful, then they would just be capitalists. However, they are not. People are already allowed to create worker co-ops in communist communities within capitalism. However, it doesn't go the other way. Socialism only works through violence. I've already made all the points I wanted to make. Like I said before, capitalism is voluntarism. Socialism and communism is violence. You can cope all you want, but that's just the truth. And I don't want to live in a violent society. Violence breeds conflict, and conflict breeds social degradation. I don't want to threaten my neighbors with violence, and I don't want them to threaten me either. Violence isn't a sustainable economic system, and that is why I'm a capitalist.